my new coffee advice. This time I started putting cinnamon in my coffee because I read that was a superfood. I thought it was just junk food, but apparently it's a superfood, and you really should eat more cinnamon. It tastes great in your coffee and definitely makes you feel better. So we've also got some mushroom extract in there. You know, that's popular these days. Helps with brain function, memory, sharpness, all of that good stuff. So that's today's coffee, and we've got this massive cup, and it's got like "We the People." It's got some constitutional, let's see, it's text on there, and it's got a seal emblem. Not even awesome. Somebody gave it to me. All right. I'll pass it over to Jevin. Thanks for helping moderate today and be my guest. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. So welcome everyone to Coffee with Crenshaw, this time hosted by the Woodlands Area Economic Development Partnership, or the EDP. First, thank you to Congressman Dan Crenshaw for being here today and to this great audience. My name is Jevin Gibb, and I'm the CEO of the EDP. We're a partnership where the public and private sectors collaborate to help our region achieve its economic potential. We bring the next generation of companies to the Woodlands. We facilitate conversations like this today, and we get stuff done. I'd like to thank our legacy partners, the Woodlands Township, our gold partner, Howard Hughes Holdings, and all our 94 partners for their support. Also, awesome to be here with you today. We've got a little bit in common. You were a Navy SEAL, I was a Navy JAG. You're a girl dad, I'm about to be a girl dad. Yours is 18 months, mine is in 3 weeks, so obviously you do everything better and faster than me. But with that, let me throw it back to you for kind of a quick summary, and then we can get to some questions.
Sure, and yeah, well, welcome to the grind. It's amazing. We love little Susie. She's everything, and she's cute but violent is what we like to describe her as. We're going to talk about serious issues today, but I think she could at least at this point, at 18 months, beat up any boy, probably, and many adults who would attack her. But she's tons of fun. You'll enjoy it. Yeah, so we'll go to a quick summary of what's been going on. A lot of this you already know, so this we'll go as fast as possible, I think, and we'll get to some questions, and then we'll do some audience questions as well. So I think one of the most obvious changes since Trump took office is the border. Fixed it in about 5 minutes, let's be honest. Because it really was that easy. It really just took willpower. Now, look, there are still laws that need to be codified, because it's one thing to have a president that decides that he's just going to do this, but we will have another president one day, and it will be a Democrat at some point. And they will not have the same willpower that President Trump does to secure the border. So, we still need to close asylum loopholes. I've introduced these bills over the years. Close asylum loopholes, fix the Flores settlement that you may have heard of. It's a court order that basically forces you to release family units after 21 days, which created the catch and release problem. It also creates an incentive to bring children with you, because that applies only if you have minors with you. And so that's one of that court order there was 2 of them, but back from 2014 was the most recent. That's what created this pull of children being trafficked across the border, because adults knew that they would have to be then released, and then Border Patrol would then see children being recycled. It was really terrible. So on day one, or at least close, yeah, on day one, Trump signed the Securing Our Borders executive order, which it resumed the border wall construction. It increased federal law enforcement presence at the border, shifted that catch and release approach to actually prosecuting immediately those who violate immigration laws. And of course, it's gone all over the country, seeking to aggressively deport those who have broken our laws. Focusing on those who have broken other laws as well first, because it's like, well, they didn't break a law yet. It's like, no, they're here legally, they broke a law. But they're still focusing on those who broke additional laws, who broke additional criminal laws. You'll see criticism oftentimes that people getting wrapped up who didn't break another law. Well, that's likely because they were in the house when the arrest took place. ICE will not ignore somebody who's here illegally just because they don't have a warrant, an additional warrant for, say, another violent crime. That's usually what's happening. I would say that's what to tell the critics. If the critics are talking to you about this, it's like, look, you're going after one guy who's accused on a murder charge, But there's also a bunch of other people in that particular location who maybe don't have a murder charge or any other violent crime charges, but they are there illegally. ICE is going to detain them and put them on the deportation bird, just like anybody else. What else has gone on this that I can update you on? I mean, the results speak for themselves. That's worth noting. I mean, you know, at the high under the Biden administration, you had 250,000 encounters at the border. That doesn't necessarily mean all of them got in, but a lot of them did under Biden. But 250,000 in December of 2023. And that really speaks to the Biden policies because it speaks to the pull mechanisms that they allowed. And just under a couple months under President Trump, we've had the lowest daily count in 15 years, which is 200. So Border Patrol morale is up. They can finally do their jobs, which is to actually patrol the border. What we want Border Patrol doing is looking for the gotaways, right? Looking for those who are trying to climb the wall, go under the wall, around the wall, like sneak in. What Border Patrol has been doing historically is instead just sitting there and waiting for hundreds of people to just cross at a time and turn themselves into Border Patrol. They would do this on the regular because they know that there's a catch and release system in place. So now, and that would turn Border Patrol into bus drivers, nannies, you know, nurses. Like that's all Border Patrol was doing, and it was horrible for their morale. I mean, that's not why you sign up for Border Patrol. You sign up to, frankly, carry a gun and patrol the border. So we're back to doing that, and that's very good. Cartels, worth update on that. I was just in Mexico this week for 3 days. That's my third trip there. Not trying to knock other members, but like when people say, "Hey, I've been to the border 12 times," it makes you kind of a slow learner. Like, I'm sorry, it's true. And you know, going to the border is important because you need to learn about a lot of these issues that I just talked about. But you need to go to Mexico City. You need to go to Monterrey. You need to understand what's happening in Mexico and in Mexican politics and at our embassy. I've never seen a more operational embassy than the one we have in Mexico City. It's a really interesting place to visit. And you know, every agency is there. It's one of our biggest embassies in the world. And there's a lot of new opportunities there with the new Mexican administration that were not there before. You know, the previous president AMLO is, well, it's like an acronym. It's President Lopez Obrador. The new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, is his successor. It's like, it's handpicked by AMLO, still sort of a left-wing socialist in Latin American terms. That means a little something different than it does here. But still a very different outlook on security. And her head of security, let's call him the head of national security. His actual title is something, like a Secretary of Security and Internal Human Affairs or something like that. But he is the real deal. His name is Omar Harfouch, and we work with him very closely. The American government works with him very closely. We have for years, and so we're very excited to see him in the most powerful position possible next to the president, leading all things national security. And they're actually going out every night. Some of their top tier units in Mexico going out every night, going after the Sinaloa cartel right now. That's their main target at the moment because they want to target fentanyl. See, they're smart. They were ready for President Trump. They knew exactly what President Trump's demands would be. That's why you saw when President Trump had a 25% tariff threat on Mexico, they had an answer the same day because they'd already prepared for it. And they still have a list of things that are in preparation, which is all good. This is all great. This is how it should be. And so they're doing a lot. And my previous visits to Mexico, I was there a year ago under the different administration, and they straight up told me, "We don't want your help. We don't want free stuff from you. We don't want free guns. We don't want free helicopters." And I'm like, "What? You're crazy." It's like, "Well, we could buy them, but we won't take them." I'm like, "You can't afford them, so why don't you? We want you to have them. I mean, if you going after cartels is exactly what we need." And so that impediment, it doesn't appear to be there the way it used to be. There's a massive amount of opportunity. Congress has to act. The Trump administration is getting there. We still need an ambassador to Mexico. We have a great one, Ron Johnson. I'm very excited about that pick. He should make it through the Senate just fine. I believe he already had his hearing, and then we're rocking and rolling. But we really do need a whole of government approach. And I believe, I've heard the administration at the cabinet level has set up a narco task force. Hopefully the idea is to centralize an effort and look at this in a whole of government way. In Congress, we've been doing that at the cartel task force. We no longer have a cartel task force. It sort of ran its course. I mean, we had 30+ meetings with officials inside and outside of government, experts. I traveled the country to 9 different locations, to different agencies, traveled to Mexico, like I said, 3 different times, Colombia, Panama, to develop a true picture of what's going on, about who's doing what on our side, what the Mexicans are doing, and then what needs to be done to actually defeat what is a terrorist insurgency, and that's effectively what the cartels are. This is obviously something near and dear to my heart, because it's I think the nearest short-term threat to Americans because of their fentanyl trafficking, and because destabilizing our neighbor, biggest trading partner, is not a good thing. That's just not something that's good for the U.S. if Mexico is completely destabilized. So that's something we're working on. I've been working with the speaker to get a select committee created on cartels, because that would give us the staffing resources needed to actually push the legislation and the legislative ideas that we have to a professionalized level that they need to be at. It's very difficult to do that with just a personal office and literally no other members that are, they say they're interested, they talk a lot, but nobody really wants to do the work, I've noticed. So we're pushing that as hard as we can. I will say President Trump's tariff threats and carrot stick approach with Mexico actually have been working quite well also. And I'll say it gives the good Mexicans, because there's a lot of good Mexicans in government there now. And it gives them the excuse they need to do what they want to do anyway. It's worked out. I don't think anybody wants those tariffs to be permanent, us or Mexico. It'd be bad for a lot of the businesses here. I'd hear that all the time. But we're getting where we need to get. On energy, look, what do we do on energy? And this will be a question I saw coming from the audience later. Mostly we just need to leave energy alone. The energy sector just needs to be left alone. We'll work to roll back the EPA. There's a lot of EPA regulations that went into place that this administration will soon work back. Okay, you've got Lee Zeldin up there, and we're making sure they know what those are. It's things like the methane rule. There's particulate matter requirements. There's all sorts of things that are related to the energy sector, but also the petrochemical sector, that are just nonsense. A lot of that is administrative. We can pass the Congressional Review Act, which serves to reverse rules that were done in the last 60 days by the Biden administration. But I'll tell you what, it still needs to get 60 votes in the Senate. So don't hold your breath for that. A lot of this stuff has to be reversed. It was done administratively. It can be reversed administratively. Although in some cases that's easier said than done. Part of helping the American energy sector will be, of course, getting our tax bill through reconciliation, because, well, a better tax environment affects everyone, including the energy sector. One of the things I also want to address, and this has been important to me, and it's been the fight that I've taken on my committee, Energy and Commerce, is gender transition affirmation therapies for minors. This is especially important. I have we have 2 daughters in the world now, and the last thing I want to see is her getting terrible and misguided pseudoscience information from the internet, and also having to compete with boys in women's sports. It's just not. Then again, I think she might kick their ass, but it's just not something we want to see. And so the president executive order did an immediate one that would from the executive level defunds providers that perform these procedures on minors. That's going to be a very specific lane. I don't want to give you guys too much hope. You're going to still hear about this stuff happening despite that executive order. There needs to be laws put in place. I mean, Texas led the way on this. Texas, it's not allowed here, period. Doesn't, it's just not. And that's what there's maybe 20-something states that have done similar restrictions on it. At the federal level, my preferred bill to get to all children's hospitals is to withhold what's called graduate medical education funding. That's a very important funding stream. It's a good funding stream. It funds residencies. You need it. All hospitals need it. We want them to have it. But we want some restrictions to be on that money, which is you can't do gender affirmation care on kids if you're taking the money. So that's the most clear-cut way to get to it. We had actually passed that out of committee last year. But we couldn't get the speaker to bring it to the floor. Understandably, we didn't have the Senate at that time, we didn't have the White House. We would have passed it out of the House, maybe, but there was no forward path for it. As we continue to fight this battle, I would still hope that we could get, what do we need, 8 Democrats to cross, maybe 7 Democrats to cross over in the Senate to pass something like that. Knowing that that's difficult, we are putting forward legislation into withhold Medicaid funding because graduate medical education you can't do in reconciliation. Quick lesson on reconciliation and what we should probably talk about that. And give you an update on what reconciliation even is and how that's going to go. Reconciliation means we're reconciling the budget. That's effectively that's the legislative vehicle that it is. The reason we use it is because we never have 60 votes in the Senate, and reconciliation requires 51 votes in the Senate. That's why Democrats used it to pass the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan. That's why we used it to pass Kevin Brady's original TCRJ, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's all done through reconciliation. So because we don't have 60 votes in the Senate, that's how we'll make the tax cuts permanent. That's how we'll do a lot of the reforms that we're talking about, this one included. So with that, I think I'll wrap up and we'll get to questions. I think there's a lot to be excited about. One of the things I'm most excited about, of course, is the opportunities lying ahead with finally taking out the cartels that are killing tens of thousands of Americans with fentanyl, protecting American energy, streamlining our healthcare, making it make a lot more sense for Americans. I think there's a lot to be excited about. So from that, we'll get to questions and involve you guys a little bit more. So thank you for being here.
Great. So we'll start with a question on U.S. relationships in the Western Hemisphere. Concerning the border and people, how should we focus on Mexico and our relationships with nations south of the border? The person who asked this question thinks we might lose our economic advantage versus countries like Argentina and Brazil. How would you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll leave that one alone for now. But look, Secretary Marco Rubio's first visit was to Panama. That was really significant, and choosing Rubio as Secretary of State is significant. It tells you that this administration will have a much deeper focus on Western Hemisphere. I've always been focused on the Western Hemisphere. That's my work on the Intelligence Committee. That's my region that I focus on. The new chairman, Rick Crawford, is deeply focused on Western Hemisphere. We've got 4 of us that the Western Hemisphere cell will travel to these places. We'll actually travel to Argentina in April. And meet with the new president there. There's a ton of opportunity with Argentina because of their new leadership. Brazil's always been a little tougher. They always kind of want to do their own thing and speak their own language and all that stuff in South America. So, but look, it takes diplomacy and it takes willpower and it takes resources. One of our tougher challenges in Latin America and all over the world, but the place I care about this challenge the most is Latin America. Is the Chinese, the Chinese investments coming in. The Chinese engage in economic warfare all over the world, and you can't outspend them, right? They are operating ports and cranes and subways at a total loss. They are not making any money. So American companies go in there, they look at it, and they're like, I'm not doing that. And so they don't even bid on it. And then our diplomats go to these countries, and they're like, why are you buying Chinese stuff? And they're like, we wouldn't, but they're the only ones who bid. What do you want us to do? It's a really hard problem to solve. You could make things like the Import-Export Bank stronger. I know a lot of people on the right hate that, but I'll tell you, it actually makes the taxpayer money. So it helps fund those projects without actually subsidizing them. It's not losing money, but it's kind of a political football. And even then, no matter how much more robust you made that, it's not really competing in a really hard way with the Chinese. It's a difficult problem. So it takes, again, kind of a whole of government approach. What Trump has done is said, look, you take Chinese stuff, we're gonna tariff you 25%. That tends to work actually. And then they start to give the stiff arm to the Chinese. So also just show what we also do is reveal some of the Chinese nefarious activities. We do this in a very careful way with partner nations. all over the world. We say, hey, look, you know what they're doing? We can show you how they're sending the data back. Do you like that? Is that what you wanted? Oh, I didn't think you wanted that. And they're like, what? And so then they start ripping out Huawei material. I mean, that's kind of the best way to deal with it. But honestly, sometimes just showing a lot of these countries some attention is just what you need to do.
So switching gears, where does President Trump stand on daylight savings time?
I can't speak for President Trump. He's probably made a comment about it at some point. I'm not a spokesperson, but I do. At some point, the Senate did pass a bill that would make daylight savings time permanent, meaning now, like what you have now would just be the thing. No more darkness at 4 p.m., which makes everybody mad. I think we could all support that. So why it hasn't gotten anywhere, I don't know. It should. I think I'd vote for it.
So as Trump is going after corruption and inefficiency in the federal government, does he have any plans to go after corruption on municipal or other levels or in different branches?
Yeah, great question. And defining corruption, I like to be careful with my words. And when I hear corruption, I hear illegal activity. There's corruption and then there's just stupidity. And 99% of the time, the answer is just stupidity, and that's a very natural thing to occur in any large bureaucracy. Bureaucracies work different than your businesses. Your business is profit-oriented and sort of has to work efficiently. You actually give people more freedom in your business to make decisions on their own, and you can do that because everybody's operating toward a common goal of a profit-oriented goal. In bureaucracy, you can't do that. You have to wrap people in red tape, make them inefficient because they have biases, because their mission isn't profit, their mission is do good. But do good according to who and to what values? So that's politics, right? That's the debate. So always be skeptical of this idea that you can just make a bureaucracy like a business, because they're apples and oranges to begin with. Now there is, and so what you have to go after, and what Doge has been interesting in doing is taking a data analytics approach, sort of scraping mass amounts of data and putting it through their, letting their nerdy software engineers kind of whatever, to create some algorithms and provide you some outtakes about what's going on. Now, once you get that information, you need to have somebody who knows what they're doing actually look at it, so that you can come up with the right solutions to fix it. And that's the part that actually takes time. So now, and then at the municipal level, well, that's a U.S. attorney job. And we need to, and that's a conversation for our DOJ. I would like our DOJ to give the following guidance to our U.S. attorneys. I would like them to go after corruption at the municipal level, mostly because I live in Houston. And I live in Harris, we're in Montgomery County, but I live in Harris County, where there's a lot of corrupt officials, and everybody knows exactly what's going on. And I want our, but the U.S. attorney is actually in charge of going after those corrupt officials and building those cases, and that just hasn't been done. So that would be a good thing to see, at least here, and in certain areas around the country. I think that's what they should be doing. The other thing they really need to be doing is actually going back to cartels. They don't in a lot of places because they feel overwhelmed. It doesn't feel like a priority for them. There's too many cases, and I heard about this on my trip in Mexico with some of the people who look at this closely. Say in Arizona, just getting caught with a bunch of fentanyl but being let go, not being brought up on federal charges. So that's a real problem. They're overwhelmed. I mean, some might argue there should be twice the number of U.S. attorneys that we currently have to do these kind of jobs.
Are we serious about making Canada our 51st state, or is this another negotiation tactic for something else?
Trump is definitely negotiating with Canada, but the negotiation is the tariffs. He likes to mess with people. Like that's what's happening. He loves it. He loves it because the media takes it so seriously, or they take it literally, right? And I heard this quote last night. I thought it was pretty good, and I think it came from a Democrat even. It's like the problem with the left is they take Trump literally but not seriously, and on the right we take him seriously but not literally. And that's the kind of the right way to look at it. Like it's obvious he's just messing with people here, and it's like he wants to. He's messing with the media. He's messing with Canadians. He's like, I just thinks it's funny. So he knows that would bring us 2 more Democrat senators. We don't want that. And I don't like the number 51. You know, even if there was another really odd, like perfect new state, I'd still say no, because 51 just doesn't work. 50's right. You know?
How do you fit it on the flag?
It's just, yeah, I mean, you could probably figure it out, but it's just a 51 state, like, come on, no.
So the next question, actually, they're praising you in the first few sentences for your discussion with guests on your weekly communications. And the transparency that you're willing to admit when you don't know something or when you need to learn more, taking ideas to heart that are shared by your guest speakers. They mentioned the discussion on lean management with former EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler and his emphasis on transparency. You kind of answered this in an earlier question, but can we do more than just increasing transparency and cutting staff? Could we review and hold the government accountable to improve performance and eliminate failing programs?
Oh, 100%. And you know, this is a really good example of actual ways to make the government more efficient. Because yeah, I mean, you can expose a bunch of stuff, sure, but you got to know what to do. Firing people is not making the government more efficient. You know, we need to be clear about what we mean by smaller government. I mean a smaller role for government. I want the government to have less power to undercut your life. That's what I mean by a smaller role of government. Some agencies need a lot more people, actually, so that they can do their job properly for you. Some agencies need less people. You gotta have a more rational conversation. We have to have a more rational conversation about where you need more and where you need less. You know, just firing a bunch of people doesn't make the government more efficient by any stretch. Doesn't make it better for you necessarily. It could. Does the Department of Education need all those people? Hard to say. First of all, they don't have hardly anybody. That's like between 4,000 and 6,000. And their entire job is to really just administer student loans. So we can get rid of it. Won't really have much of an effect on your life because we're not getting rid of the student loan program. It would just get transferred to some other agency. Because I know we get a lot of questions about Department of Education. We actually had a whole really good podcast on that, if you'd like to look it up, where I really lay that out. Like, what does it mean to get rid of the Department of Education? So, like, everybody's kind of wrong about that one. Like, the left is wrong, because the left will say, you're just attacking education. It's like, no, that's not true. It has no effect on your education. It has no effect on your schools. Maybe 10% of funding comes from federal grants that are administered by the Department of Education, but we're not talking about getting rid of the grants even. It's just the bureaucracy that administers them. Maybe it could be administered through some other bureaucracy. I don't know. But also, I don't want people on the right to think that you get rid of it and all of a sudden everything's hunky-dory. It's not true either. You just fired a bunch of people. That's it. And you don't even know who they are. So it's you know, sometimes I'm just here to tell you the truth. What can I say? This one was really interesting. Andrew Wheeler is the former head of EPA. And he came on my podcast. We were going to talk about EPA regulations. I think the EPA is one of the most least talked about, but likely the most dangerous organization as to your interests, because it wants to ensure that your things can't get built and produced. Like that seems to be, under the Biden administration, one of the key missions of the EPA. Let's stop building and producing things that people need and like for modern life. I mean, that's how I would describe what they were doing. So Andrew Wheeler had an interesting, we had an interesting discussion on lean management. Now, this is some business school term that I hadn't heard before. You know, we went to the government school, whatever that does. Didn't get us any great. You go to the business school, you get a much better paying job, and you learn about lean management. So he actually implemented this because after the EPA, he went on to work for Governor of Virginia, Youngkin. Thank you. He went to work on for Governor Youngkin, and they launched Virginia Permit Transparency. And all lean management is they basically implemented a system that lets companies who are applying for a permit to track exactly where their permit stands in real time. It just keeps people accountable because it creates a transparency that did not exist before. And that creates a culture of trying to get the permit done on time. It's like they didn't even put teeth on it. They didn't, and I would want to, I'd want to say, hey, if you don't get it done by this time, it's automatically approved. Those are ideas also. There's lots of ideas that go along these lines. We were looking at legislation that would actually make EPA do that. Now the current administrator of EPA could do that. That's not something we need to make him do from a legislative perspective, but it always helps when you codify something like that. So that's just one of many ways you could make the government work a little bit better.
So another question about cartels. I know you've long been a champion of issues related to mitigating the cartels on the other side of the southern border, specifically with the Cartel Task Force. Have you spoken with President Trump about the changes you'd like to see, and can we expect Congress to codify the president's actions on the border?
Yeah, and I talked about this at length, so I won't repeat anything, but a couple months in Mar-a-Lago, I did bring up to the president that my goal after doing a couple years of work on the task force was to turn that task force into something more robust, something that could hire staff and help us out. And I was select committee. I said, do you support that? He's like, Dan, you want to kill him, right? You want to kill the cartels, right? I said, yes, sir, of course. It's good. I'm with you. That was it. That was our conversation about it. I mean, there was a big dinner. We talked a lot about a whole number of subjects, but that was the only cartel conversation. So, look, obviously it's a priority for the president. As I told you before, they're still getting staffed up on a lot of these things, and a lot of the foreign affairs focus for the administration right now is pretty obvious. Russia, the Middle East. I mean, there's a lot going on. So. One of the conclusions I had from our report is you need an executive branch. I don't like the word czar, but we use it, right? We have a border czar. Tom Homan is the border czar, and that just makes him the senior advisor to the president on border issues. And then but all of that still filters down through the different agencies to actually implement them. I would argue you would need something like that on cartels, because there are so many parallel efforts that have to be undertaken to fight in what is an insurgency. Now, an insurgency is an enemy that is integrated into every level of society. That's what I mean by insurgency. That's why it's so difficult to fight. And so, one of the weakest points, for instance, is the Mexican judiciary system. You can train and equip certain parts of the Mexican military, even get them vetted, get them trusted, keep watch on them, and we do. It's much harder on prosecutors. Now, the DOJ actually has programs, for instance, that do exactly this, where they send DOJ attorneys out to other countries, and we try to train them on how to prosecute a case. Any guesses on what the prosecution rate is in Mexico? 5%? Anybody else? 3%? Anybody else? Take one? Okay, you're the closest. It's 1.5. You know what it is in the U.S.? It's like 98. Because in the U.S., a federal prosecutor, they want to make sure they have a case. They want to make sure they get that conviction rate. In Mexico, it's like the system just doesn't even work. Now, some of that is the laws are moving against them. The new administration is trying to change that, actually, and they have been. But sometimes just training prosecutors how to be prosecutors. So you got to train law enforcement how to be law enforcement, how to collect evidence the correct way, according to your own laws, bring it to the prosecution, and carry that all the way through to jail, and an actual conviction and sentencing. And we only have 5 lawyers really doing that right now. I'll be honest with you, we actually have 0, and that's actually a result. Just being honest with you, that's a result of DOJ kind of going through USAID and what's called INL funding at State Department. So we're trying to fix that. Some of the stuff should have gotten rid of, right? Like no transgender operas in Peru. It's a good thing to get rid of. I don't know who in Peru even wants to see that. It's not known for its like transgender culture. Same with Colombia, but you can't throw all the babies out with the bathwater. And in Mexico, you don't need 5 attorneys down there. You need 50. You need 50 completely. You need half of them actually working on individual cases with the Mexicans, like, hey, let's help you every step of the way on this individual case, and then you can get some metrics out of that. And you need another 25 setting up curriculum to actually teach them how to do it, because the institutions just aren't there. And so, like, again, this is why you call it counterinsurgency, because counterinsurgency is a lot more than just hitting some bad guys. It's about capacity building at all levels to actually deal with this problem. So I'll stop. There's so much we could say on cartels. We could talk forever, but let's move on. Yeah. And I want to get some questions from the audience. Maybe we just, what else do we got here? Maybe we just start there. So
Reconciliation.
That you guys can feel involved since you actually showed up. We got.
As he's going through that, that capacity building is what JAGS did in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Quick shout out to the lawyer nerds in the Navy.
We need them. We need them. You know, yeah. Let's just go to the audience. You guys came to show up. You know, you deserve to ask some questions.
Risky. My question is, could you lead the way on securing jobs for all of the fired veterans and all of the fired people who provide services to our veterans?
Recently fired? What do you? You know, I don't have any. The problem is we don't know. And look, that's the problem. We don't have good numbers in Congress. We're learning about this stuff at the speed of light, the way you are. And like I said, I'm going to admit, I think there's been some babies thrown out with the bathwater here. But we're still gathering information on it. And look, that issue I just told you about the lawyers that need to be training Mexican prosecutors, that program, I've already contacted the State Department about it, contacted Rubio himself. The problem is, again, he's busy. He's a friend of mine, but he's busy. He's focused on other parts of the world at the moment. So look, the people who shouldn't be gone, who are actually doing their jobs, whether they're a veteran or not. I mean, look, there's some veterans who are hired and maybe they're not doing a good job. That's just because you're a veteran doesn't mean I'm gonna. But if you're doing a job that we need you to do and you're doing it well, yeah, we've got to fight for you.
Hello. Oh, it works. Yes, Congressman, I appreciate I know you filed a bill that would allow alternative medicine for PTSD, and right now it seems to be led by SEALs, and you probably know them, like Marcus Capone and Matty Roberts, people like that are working in Texas, and it looks like it has a good shot for ibogaine, which has been shown to cure opioid addiction in like 48 hours.
It's amazing, yes.
It is, and it seems like your brethren are leading the charge, and it's got a good shot in Texas. So do you see that? I understand that RFK Jr. is also onto that alternative medicine and some Schedule I compounds that may have been, speaking of bathwater, that Nixon put on Schedule I. Do you see any movement in Washington for that?
Yeah, I mean, because we forced it. So, I mean, my legislation was signed into law last year. Maybe it's 2 years ago. I lose track of time in this job. But it gave the DoD $10 million to do clinical trials. So it contracts out those clinical trials on some of those drugs, psychedelics, you know, a variety of psychedelics that have been shown to just massively help PTSD and CTE. CTE is like brain injuries. County. They're both very open about their experiences with it. I've never done it. Probably need to because politics has given me massive PTSD. But it's people come out of that no longer needing any of the medications that they were previously on. It's like a reset, and there's a Stanford study out now that showed like an 80-something% success rate. Yeah, well, that's crazy. I mean, there's nothing else like it, and so yep, we're on the right track there. The FDA also is not against this. I mean, this is one thing I think RFK said that he wasn't really correct about. He was, you know, the FDA is with us on this. They actually, I mean, and we know this because they established guidelines to properly go through the clinical trials. You wouldn't do that if you weren't trying to support it, because they did reject the most recent MDMA. Application, but the timing wasn't great. They had done their application before the clinical guidelines had come out. So I think everybody's on the same page. Like RFK's on, we're all on the same page. And Rick Perry's been really instrumental on the Texas level. I don't work at the Texas level, but yeah, we are seeing some really good headway there. and it's a group that actually came out of Tennessee that's trying to create a program here. I don't know a whole lot about it, but Rick Perry's really pushing the Texas government, state government, to be adopting these as well. Now, how they do that, it still has to work with federal law, so I'm not exactly sure what the plan would be, but we're figuring it out. Okay, perfect. Yeah, and that's great.
On the transgenders, with them wanting to participate in women's sports, what is the other side of the aisle? I mean, I know you have to be talking to them. What is their understanding? Women had to go and find their own league. Why are they not?
I don't know. It's crazy. You're absolutely right. And I get asked this question all the time, like, how can they possibly believe this? Like, there's no way, right? I mean, in private, they must tell you something different, right? And they don't. I mean, there's some Democrat. I met one yesterday. She was Speaker Johnson at a fundraiser, and she's a state rep here who transferred. She left the Democrat Party because of that. So some do, but they're doubling down because they're so scared of there's a civil war on the Democrat Party, just like there always is on the Republican as well. But there really is one on the Democrat Party right now. Like, do you go more moderate? Do you go more extreme? Was it smart to run an election based on these really crazy niche issues that like only 2% of the population is even in favor of? And they're answering that question yes right now. They don't like, it's not easy in a political party to just completely reverse. What's great about being a conservative is you tend to have your belief systems that live in a box. That's the whole point. They conserve. They're not supposed to change radically. The thing about being a progressive is it's like progress. Well, you can keep progressing into all directions, into nowhere. And that's often what happens. You sort of never know what's next. I mean, we never would have, 20 years ago, never would have anticipated that we would be at this point, even having a conversation about gender affirmation therapies, but yet here we are. So I don't think I have a satisfying answer for you, because I've never gotten anyone to tell me privately that they're actually against it, but they feel like they have to go along with the crowd. They won't admit that. But it's true. But it's definitely true. I'm like, and I'll say it in hearings. I'm like, you guys didn't believe this stuff 5 minutes ago. You really didn't. You really didn't. You got caught up in the pseudoscience. You thought you were on the right track. The world was moving that direction. And now you don't know what to do, because the Europeans are like, oh, nope, the science doesn't say that, so we're reversing everything. Europeans are a little bit more technocratic in that sense, and a little less crazy than American progressives. And American progressives are still trying to figure out what to do with that. But I think we're on track to at least win the battle legally, so. Yeah, it's a very unifying issue. It shouldn't even be along party lines, and we're winning the debate quite easily. And I think what you're noting is, there's a gay community too that's just like, we're not part of this. We're just trying to live our lives. We're not trying to do all the weird stuff and thing with kids. Like, that's not us. And they get very offended by it, and rightfully so. They're just people trying to live their lives. So that's why you're seeing that separation.
Congressman, appreciate you representing us. President Trump talked about no tax on Social Security income. Can you kind of give us a flavor of what's really going on the congressional as it relates to Social Security income?
Yeah, don't get your hopes up on that one.
I didn't think so, but I wanted to get some idea of where we're at, because, seniors are struggling. We're losing money in the stock market. We're losing, we're living longer, and we're trying to stretch our money out.
Well, okay, so on reconciliation, we just legally can't touch Social Security. So luckily, I don't have to give an opinion on it, because we can't do it anyway. It's always been, I'll tell you the debate though, like the pros and cons. It's like, on the one hand, you want to help seniors. On the other hand, well, what about everybody else? Because why are you special? So it's a tough issue when you talk about any single group all of a sudden just not paying taxes. That's, is that really fair? Is that going to be fair to my generation? Because I'll tell you what, where Social Security is going right now, it's going great for you. It's not going great for me. So we haven't had our chance to be in the stock market like you have since 1970. So it has gone up quite a bit since then. So the Social Security debate, which is going to be a major one when it goes insolvent in the next 10 years, it shouldn't be a left-right debate, although everything turns out that way. It should be a generational debate. It should be the younger generation talking to the older generation, hey, what are you going to give and what am I going to give? Should I really retire at 67? No, I should not. I should retire later. That's what my generation should give. But both generations going to have to give something. That's the honest conversation about Social Security. But in the short term, nothing's happening to Social Security and reconciliation because legally it can't. That's part of the reconciliation rules. So no one's touching it any way, shape, or form. Yeah, we need to look into the data on that one. I'm not sure that money has actually gone out. So I don't want to take a position on whether that. Sometimes that data comes out, and I think some people read it differently. About he was talking about like when Elon was saying there was 200, people who were 200 years old on Social Security. I think the next burden of proof needs to be, did a check literally go out to this person? And I haven't seen that yet, so I don't want to say anything just yet. Sorry. Let's go to the side, or somebody's got a mic. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to stop pointing at people.
Good
you guys
morning.
Just get up and ask. Yeah.
I'm Christine Marlowe with Montgomery County Food Bank, so it's always a pleasure to be in the same room with you. And thank you for serving us and for representing our values here in Texas. We are, I think I speak for some of my nonprofit colleagues who are in this room. As the business world and our civilians have the challenges happening with the different funding streams, the different cuts, the nonprofit world, I think, has a very unique challenge in that, as we all agree, serving people, and some of their basic needs is being challenged right now with that. And I also come from an understanding that there's a lot of uncertainty around these funding streams, the way the money still has to be allocated. But what's concerning to us is this immediate need that is going to be happening, when the hammer is dropped, when the actual outcomes happen with the cost of, what's happening in the economy and groceries. We're really anticipating a big pinch on that. And so my I guess just plea to you is to remember that as you're, advocating for us and as we're caring for the citizens of the state who need that help. There are a lot of ramifications that go with a lot of those funding cuts that we do. So do you maybe have a perspective on some future outcomes? I know when Trump was previously in administration, there were a lot of great outcomes that did come from that, but we've got this real testing fire period that we're about to enter that's going to significantly not only impact us as nonprofits, but also the business community because it impacts our people. So thank you.
And you guys do such amazing work at Montgomery Food Bank, and really appreciate you. And it's good to see you here. I would need more specifics to answer the question properly. And again, sometimes I'm taking in this news just as you are, but I'm not afraid to tell the administration, hey, in this case, you threw the baby out with the bathwater. This is yeah. So we would just need specifics on it, and that's our job is to see what's happening. If there's a program cut that really didn't make sense to cut, we need to know that, and at least. I can't promise that it'll work, but we can at least inform the administration like we continue to do. So, because it's happening, a lot of it happens very fast, but I do have some faith that our cabinet secretaries then do some cleanup on the back end. But it doesn't happen. That part doesn't happen at light speed. So we will work on it, but we will need specifics. Where's the microphone? All right. I thought we had a system. All right.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Vannekamp. I'm the executive director at Family Promise of Lake Houston. I'm also a nonprofit within your congressional district. My question is, with the shift of the Department of Education responsibilities back to the states and one of your priority issues being education, what are your plans to ensure there are no gaps in funding and oversight of special education services, free and reduced lunches, and additional services for vulnerable populations, especially since these individuals join the workforce via trade schools at a much higher rate than other standard student populations?
Yeah, so I touched on this earlier. If you got rid of the Department of Education right now, which they can't even do because you'd have to get congressional support. You'd have to actually do that by law. I mean, they can tinker with it, right? They can fire some people, and you should be able to fire some people who aren't being productive. But the grants, all that list of funding streams that you just talked about, which is what the Department of Education administers, it does not mean those go away. They actually can't go away unless Congress makes them go away. And there's not going to be support to make them go away. And there's not even talk in the administration of making them go away. The talk is about just the bloated number of federal workers it takes to administer those programs. And again, is that true or not? I don't know. Like, I'd have to literally go there and see who's doing what, and and I think maybe they're in the process of doing that. But I wouldn't fear the loss of the funding streams and grant programs that you just talked about, because it would take a lot more action than just getting rid of DOE to actually stop all that. The administration of those things would simply move to a different agency, and even that's not what's happening right now. So again, it's a lot of headlines at the moment, but look, if you see that pause on your schools, let me know immediately. But I don't think we are.
I'm Janie Brenner.
Yep. Hi,
Thank
it's good to
you
see
for
you.
being our congressman. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do for education. And thank you for supporting the retired teacher Social Security benefits. I thank you for that. I know you worked extremely hard, and your hard work does not go unnoticed with the retired teachers. Thank you for everything that you do for our community.
I appreciate it, Janie. It's good to see you.
It's Mike Lamonica is my name. I'd like to touch base on the status for refilling the strategic reserve.
A great question. I don't know. I don't know where it's at right now. I'd have to get back to you. Sorry, I just don't have the number on me. It's not something I keep on the top of my head, but we'll happy to get back to you. I'm sure we could Google it and give you an answer here before the end of the session. Sorry.
Good morning, Dan.
Hey, Robert, how you doing? Great to see you.
Good. Hey, got a question on Social Security disability. Folks that get on it during the Trump's administration, 16 to 20, they reviewed the cases every 5 years. Under the Biden administration, they stopped doing that. This is just an administrative procedure. There's nothing legislative. Can we just get Social Security, go back and review these folks that are on Social Security disability, make sure that, it's like with the VA, they review us every 5 years, you know, to look and see where our disability's at. And
It should be reviewed every 2 years.
That hasn't.
Okay.
That ain't
Well,
happening.
that's a great thing to take up.
Yes, it is.
To the administration. I'm not even sure the Social Security administrator is appointed yet, but that's one of those things that's a great list item to say, just train them, like, hey, Biden changed it for the worse. I would argue it should be even less time. I mean, disability insurance is meant to, it's what replaced welfare. I mean, welfare reform in the 90s under Clinton, of all people, basically gutted welfare, but it still gave people that safety net under SSDI. It's meant for a disabled person, not somebody who's working and doing fine. You're not supposed to just get checks because for no reason. So you're absolutely right. It should be reviewed. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Morning. I'm a 100% compensated veteran. I am also an Army widow. I got called last week and asked if my husband was home. Apparently they don't read the records and I'm getting WIC because he got killed on the line of duty. Long story short, I also got called and told that because I have private insurance as well as my veteran benefits, that if I don't continue to use my veteran benefits and I start going to a civilian doctor, that they might start looking at lowering my 100% compensation. Some of the things that are wrong with me aren't going to get fixed. So it's not going to go away. It's just that I can't get appointments for, 6 months, 9 months. I could have a baby at 71 and it'd be faster than getting some of the appointments. Anything that we can do about that review of records? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
So I assume you're saying you're getting called by the VA? You can talk to our office. Every case is different, so I can't speak to what policy is driving that.
They're reviewing our records every 12 months, and they review female records every 9 months.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure I'm against that either, because there's a lot of I think what they're trying to do, if you look at a broader policy perspective, is you're trying to right size the VA for who's using it. Now, I don't think they can reduce your actual if you're 100% permanent, if you're temporary, it's different but if you're already, I mean, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to ever change that. So that's not what would happen. And maybe the messaging wasn't correct from them, but I think they're talking more about consistent. There's a difference between what you're paid every month as your 100% compensation. That is completely separate from your ability to use the VA. So like my access to the VA is different from yours because of my wounds and because it's just everybody is rated differently, but that's very different from your 100%. And so but call it, we have good people who work those cases very individually to get your details individually. But I wouldn't worry about you wouldn't have to worry about your 100% being messed with. That wouldn't happen.
Okay. Hi, Karen Harwell here with Lone Star Family Health Center. So we're a federally qualified health center and a residency, so we have GME funding like you mentioned. This is a quick question, probably a yes or no. With gender affirming care, obviously we don't do any kind of transition medical procedures, but does that bleed over to the behavioral health world if you are counseling?
No. The legislation, well, first, yeah, Texas wouldn't be affected because it's already illegal. But the specific legislation makes it we actually say very specifically does not include things like behavioral
counseling,
therapy. Yeah,
right,
counseling.
Right.
That's exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Psychotherapy.
Perfect. Thanks.
Hi, Congressman Steve Blakey here. Thank you for being here. I'm wondering what your sense is of where we are in the Middle East and Ukraine.
Oh boy, we got a minute and a half.
Yeah,
so
you got a minute and a half to go, right?
Could be worse. Could be better. Let's start with Ukraine. So look, President Trump ran on peace. President Trump does not want Ukraine to fall. And he's dealing with a political base that's half and half on that question. And so he has actually figured out a really genius way to deal with it, which is push Zelensky into a corner, make him sign that mineral rights deal, get him on a path to peace. And he's not wrong about that. I mean, the decision to defend Ukraine, in my opinion, was the right one for that period of time. Eventually, you do have to start to figure out what the off-ramp is, or at least try. And that's the administration's goals, and they had to do some wrangling with Zelensky on this, but I think we're in a much better place now because now the ball is in Putin's court. Now, Putin is, of course, going to slam it back because he's a jerk, and Trump's not going to like that. So I think you're going to see this phase out over time. That's just the reality of it. But President Trump did exactly what he needed to do politically, and it was just the right thing to do. You had to at least try. I think we all knew how Putin's answer was going to be, and we'll go from there. What's interesting, too, is the Ukrainians are also on a very different footing than they have been in the past. About 20% of their weaponry now comes from us. Now, it is the best stuff. It's the stuff it's like air defense things that are vital to them. But the drone capabilities that they themselves are producing in country, and then we by the way, we get to take the intellectual property for, and we will use that for forever. I mean, the tactics and things we're learning from that war will benefit us for decades, and maybe save Taiwan. So they are on a better footing, but they, you can't totally pull the rug out from under them and get peace, and even Trump has said that. So we'll see where it goes from there, but I would imagine this still gets dragged out for a while because, Putin, they had that conversation and Putin's demands were absurd, right? And you can't trust the guys. But President Trump had to give it all his effort, for a lot of reasons he had to do that. And I think he did the right thing, and I think he's doing it as best as is possible given the circumstances. In the Middle East, things are just falling apart. Obviously, Israel has gone back in to hit Gaza or hit Hamas targets into Gaza, so that peace framework has for now stalled out completely. Israel has their reasons. I'm not a spokesperson for Israel, and they're kind of silent on their reasons. So I can't even explain it sometimes. I know Hamas is a bunch of terrorists that killed 1,200 people and murdered babies on purpose. And I think the counter arguments that Israel kills a bunch of children, well, you have to take into account the fact that they don't mean to kill children, that there's a serious war going on, and that they will not stop until they've completely eradicated Hamas. So that's the general aspect of what's going on. There's also some other interesting things going on in the Middle East, where Iran just effectively just losing massive amounts of influence because of Israel's actions, decapitating Hezbollah, quite literally, actually, with their explosive cell phones and radios. President Trump just launched an offensive against Houthi rebels in Yemen. We saw that. We saw the president, I think, take out one of the leaders of ISIS recently. So there is an aggressive stance from President Trump as well. I don't know what poor Tucker Carlson thinks of all this and all these warmongers in the administration. Precious Tucker. But sorry, I can't help it. But President Trump isn't that, right? President Trump takes on a realistic and aggressive view of his enemies. That's what he's doing. So it's the right thing to do. Meanwhile, they're trying to wrangle, your Sunni Gulf states and get them back into like an Abraham Accords kind of mindset. But that's difficult with everything going on in Israel. So our administration is really is constantly trying to do that. You've got Iran also, again, on its feet, but maybe that makes them desperate too. And so we got to keep a close eye on what their intentions are. Because if they feel truly existentially threatened, they'll rush to a nuclear bomb, and then they'll be existentially threatened, mostly by Israel. Israel won't let that happen. And they've got to know that we're back to support them. So it's a complex situation currently. That's just the overview. It's really hard to predict what the next month looks like.
Great. So as we wrap up, I want to say thanks again to Congressman Crenshaw. A reminder to everybody here to vote May 3rd. We've got a road bond coming up. Montgomery County has grown over 18% since 2020, driving the need for better transportation infrastructure. Cities like Conroe, Magnolia, and the Woodlands are expanding rapidly, increasing traffic congestion. To address this, the Montgomery County Commissioners Court has proposed a $480 million bond election on May 3rd. The bond aims to improve roads, enhance safety, and support future growth while maintaining residents' quality of life. May not be Ukraine or the Middle East, but it is something closer to home and important to us. Remember to, no tax increase with that. So reminder, get out to vote. Thanks again to the Congressman. Economic development is a team sport. We're proud to have leaders like you to team up with, and I'll let you close with any final remarks.
Thank you for all attending our whatever number Coffee with Crenshaw this is. This is our sort of an informal town hall that we like to do, and really appreciate your attendance. Appreciate everyone who tuned in online, and appreciate the great questions. And please stay involved. We just had elections, but you know what? They're coming right back up again. Election season starts in just by the end of the year. And we really need you to be involved. It's going to be an interesting one. So, and you people obviously are, because you're here. You come to these things. I can't tell you much that we appreciate that and that kind of civic involvement. So great to have you all. Great to represent, and an honor to represent you in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you.